Macon, Florida, growing manufacturing in the Sunshine State. Hi, Efrat.
Hi.
Hey, so it's a privilege, really, of our privilege here in Southwest Florida Manufacturing Association to host Efrat Goldratt in our podcast. So Efrat Goldratt really continuing her father's legacy, Dr. Eli Goldratt, author of the book The Goal and basically creator of Theory of Constraints. And she recently published the book Rules of Flow. So Efrat, it's really great to have you here. It's like I said, it's a huge pleasure of mine to host you.
Pleasure is all mine.
So how about you tell us a little, how are you continuing your father's legacy and maybe a few things about the new book you published?
Of course. Well, I'm an organizational psychologist, so everything that has to do with that fine, beautiful line between the individual and the organization is basically my passion. And I absorbed the theory of constraint through osmosis growing up next to my father, who developed it over the years. I was in elementary school when The Goal was published, but everyone started talking about it. It took a few years until it took off, but about 9 years later, the 1 million point milestone was achieved. And then the book really took off and people started talking about it. They started teaching it in universities. And it was wonderful to see because, you know, my father would walk through airports and would see people holding The Goal under their arms or reading it in line. I witnessed it myself a few times. So it was amazing. But there was one issue with that. Because The Goal was written on a production environment, people started thinking that basically the theory of constraint is a production theory. My father intended to have it as a holistic theory, dealing with all aspects of management, project management for sure, but also logistic, marketing, human behavior, measurements, and other elements. And he had to do something about it. And because of it, he said that now is the time to start writing my next book about project management. The project management environment, the market, is by far larger than manufacturing. And if that next bestseller will be successful, that will actually align people's expectations to understand that theory of constraint is a holistic approach.
And here you mean critical chain, right?
And I mean, he started writing Critical Chain, exactly. So we are talking about the mid-90s. At that point, people were talking about the critical path, how to plan a single project. So when he started analyzing critical path, immediately he noticed several things that he could have pointed out that we can do better, hence the name Critical Chain, as opposed to critical path. But mostly what he noticed was that when people are talking about a project management, they were talking about the fact that the biggest obstacle, the biggest challenge was the uncertainty. How do we handle the uncertainty in projects? Every project is different. A lot of delays, a lot of uncertain things happen and pop up, and we have to handle them as they go. And because of it, it is so much more difficult to handle projects versus production. So his first approach was to figure out a way to help people manage the uncertainty in projects. And that was buffer management. We all are aware of the uncertainty in projects, and we all take safety. But we are experts in hiding this safety so no one can rob it. And actually, due to several mechanisms that he described in the book, we waste that safety and we end up not having it when we really need it. So he knew he had a lot of valuable
Student syndrome, right?
Sorry?
Student syndrome.
By far one of the largest, the student syndrome. Yeah, let's postpone things until the last minute and then
we have 2 weeks.
something
Then we'll
happens.
do it on day 14.
We all did it as students and we continue to do it after we graduated. So that was the basic ideas of what to write Critical Chain on. And when he started writing that book, he was under tremendous pressure to release it to the market as far as possible because, as I said, The Goal was taking off by millions. And by the way, do you know what the estimation is? How many people have read The Goal until today, 40 years?
If I was to guess, I would say probably over 100 million.
Wow, that's very generous of you. The current estimations are around 50 million people.
Okay, so give it another 10 years.
There you go. So you can see he was under a lot of pressure to release the book Critical Chain. And as he was writing it, the evidence started to accumulate rather fast that the uncertainty is a major issue that needs to be dealt via buffer management. So everything he wrote was valid, but it's only part of the picture. It's not the whole picture. And there are other things that he needs to take care of to get the full TOC solution presented. And he was complaining that he's not writing the whole picture, that it's the wrong way to go about it, because, he's a perfectionist, as we all knew him. His decision was, and he kept saying it to everyone, I have to release Critical Chain as fast as possible. The book has enough value in it. But as soon as I figure out the full picture, I will either rewrite Critical Chain or I will write another book to talk about how to handle project management in multi-project environment and all the other key elements. Critical Chain was released. Buffer management was very successful, and it was implemented in countless projects and in organizations worldwide. It was translated into many languages, and the evidence started to accumulate that actually uncertainty was playing a key role, but very often it is not the main role in causing delays in projects. There are other items or elements inherent to how we manage the project that we ourselves are actually causing the delays. We are causing our own misery.
Interesting. Yep.
Which also means we can take charge of it and we can change how we are managing our projects in order to overcome these. And that was his next main challenge, investigating the flow of projects and coming up with the rules of flow, how to better manage projects in a way that avoids delays. His findings were amazing. We are in control, or we can be in control, and we can make sure that we are delivering projects on time without going over budget and without compromising on the scope that we promised to deliver.
Quality.
Totally up to us. Nothing complicated. These are easy solutions.
So that's what I was thinking. It gives you control, right? When you know about that.
And actually, I should correct myself. When I said easy, I should have said simple. These are simple solutions. They're not easy because they require a lot of discipline.
Follow the rule, right?
Grown up
disciplines. When I was working on some implementation projects, we used to say, so there is one rule, and it's follow the rule. Follow the rules.
There you go.
Have discipline. But we always break the rules. So true.
Or we simply move on to the next bright and shiny things and completely forget about the old rule. It goes by the wayside, the mess comes back. What he found out was extremely valuable, a true breakthrough in the way that we are able to better manage projects in a way that avoid delays, in a way that brings peace and quiet to the chaos and order to the chaos. And after a goal, actually from his second book, It's Not Luck and on, I was already part of his inner circle, assisting him in writing his books, in editing his books, in coming up with ideas.
Were you just in high school then? Or
middle school and high school. It's Not Luck and
That's some experience.
I told you, I grew up with gypsy through Smuzzies. Wow. It was an incredible experience.
I bet.
And I was there when my father was so frustrated when he had to write Critical Chain, knowing he didn't have the full picture yet. And for me, project management is a key issue because it's also something that I will implement with individuals. It's also key elements that needs to be discussed in psychological therapy to that extent. So every few years I would ask him, okay, is now the time to write the new book? And he would say, not yet.
Finally, and you're a PhD. Sorry, I don't want to disrupt this, but we never mentioned you're a PhD in psychology.
Yes. I do have a PhD in organizational psychology. Which is my passion.
Sorry, do you want to break your train of thought?
2010, I'm returning home after my postdoc at NYU in New York. And my father says, I need you. We need to sit down and write my life philosophy book, The Choice. One of the most fabulous journeys I've ever had with my father, that year of writing the book with him. And during that book, I kept asking, okay, so what about Critical Chain? What's going on with that? And he said, that's going to be my next one. But we didn't discuss it because we were busy working on The Choice. And after Critical Chain, after The Choice, he already started to collaborate with other co-authors writing Isn't It Obvious? And we kept discussing and finally said, okay, project management is next. I need your help, Efrat. Let's figure out how to do it. And he collapsed. 2.5 months later, he was gone. lung cancer.
Oh,
We were breathless.
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
He left my brother, of course, in charge, managing his consulting company with offices around the world. He left me in charge of the copyrights, managing the contracts and the special editions of all his books with over 40 publishers around the world. But something was missing, the next book, which was one of my passions. For 10
Yep.
years, I was looking for the right person to write that book. And people told me I don't have the right name. I don't know the right style. It needs to be an Eli Goldratt style. People said different reasons why they are not
Lots
the
of
right person.
naysayers. Yeah, right.
And finally, coming COVID, I'm stranded at home. All the projects are frozen, no flying, no implementations, no nothing. And finally, I looked in the mirror and I said, that should be you. Okay. The reason why I didn't select myself to begin with was that my knowledge of project management was the osmosis, what I heard here and there. I'm not an expert in project management. I needed to learn it. So I figured out who are the number 1, 2, and 3 people in project management, the TOC way, who were there by my father's side as he was developing it, the cutting edge. And I sat with them either on Zoom or in person for months, and I studied everything that is needed. And in his honor, I published Goldratt Rules of Flow, which is my father's full picture of project management. Of course, it is done not like the goal, 400 pages, written in the style of the 80s. It was published 2 years ago, so it's a very fast pace book, less than 4 hours read as far as I was told. But everything is there in order to create or supports people's intuition to figure out what are the obstacles in their own flow and how to make sure they overcome these obstacles in order to make sure that the flow goes fast.
No, it's a great read, and it's an easy one, like you said. I like the touch that you made that it's like the second part of Critical Chain, because in the beginning you were mentioning that I was always like that Dr. Eli was always thinking about writing the second part, and I was like, which book is she talking about? And then when I saw Professor Silver, I'm like, oh, that was a nice touch in there for sure. For those who don't know, Professor Silver was the main protagonist of Critical Chain.
Yes. Well, I didn't get to the point of discussing with my father what was his decision, whether he should rewrite Critical Chain or write another book altogether. So at the end, what I decided to do is I decided to take the plot of Critical Chain and just write a sequel 10 years later. Same professor, same settings, but a different class, different students. And he was teaching the cutting edge material. Although it is very clear, I hope you would agree with me, that in the sense it is not a sequel because people are more than welcome to read this book as the first book.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have to read
100%.
Critical Chain before.
No, 100%. I guess the book that is really a sequel is It's Not Luck, right? It's
This
Not
is a
Luck. It's
sequel for the goal. Yes.
for the goal, yeah. So it would be hard to read It's Not Luck without the goal. The Critical Chain and the Rules of Flow, yeah, you can definitely start by reading Rules of Flow.
And
100% agreed.
if you don't mind me bragging, I am proud to say I have just received from my main publishers the royalty reports for last year. And Goldratt Rules of Law, that it has been published 2 years ago. So now I can tell you for 2 years in a row, as far as number of copies sold, it is number 2 to the goal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I'm sure your father would be very, very proud.
Wow. Well,
This is
thank you for
amazing.
saying that. I appreciate it.
That's
I don't take it for
definitely
granted.
big shoes to fill.
Yeah, very big shoes.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. So tell us more about Rules of Flow. So I know how many is there? 8 rules?
Well,
8 rules of flow?
here's the point. There is no number. This is why the list that I gave at the end of the book, I didn't give numbers. There are countless obstacles to flow, and each one of them is to be overcome by instituting another rules of flow. What I did was I detailed the main 7 or 8 ones in the book so people can get the intuition, what do I mean by obstacles to flow? What do I mean by rules to flow? And then go to their own environment, analyze it, and find what their obstacles to flow are. Let me give you an example. I had that conversation a few weeks ago with a consultant Adam Bean from Queensland, Australia. And he was introduced to the theory of constraints via the videos, via the books. He never went to as far as I know, to one of the formal courses or anything. But he read the goal and he was hired to help in a gigantic project to replace cooling towers in a large power plant, creating electricity, producing electricity. The task was to replace the old wooden cooling towers with the brand new fiberglass towers. They started, it's a 1 million hour project. There are several hundreds people at all times on the premises. And immediately the chaos started and immediately the delay started. And he was hired to make sure that they figure out a way to finish it, because it looked like it was going to end up being a disaster. And
it's never going to finish.
He read the goal. He said, I'm going to look for the constraint. And what he saw there, that there were multiple constraints and they kept moving around. So he said, that doesn't make sense to me. I have to look further into it. I have to study more. I have to see what's going on. And he read my book. And he realized the same principles apply, but when you look at projects, the first thing to do is to recognize the obstacles to flow. Only at a later stage will you be able to recognize the true constraints. He read my book. That's all he did. And then he went on the ground and he started investigating with the different teams on the ground. Why aren't you working? Why did you stop? Or more frequently, you were supposed to work on X. Why are you working on Y? And what he noticed was that every team told him about a different item that was missing. And because of it, they had to stop. At some point, it was materials. Another team, it was authorization. A third team, it was something else. But everyone were stopped at some point or another and had to move to occupy themselves in another part, because key elements that were absolutely necessary for them to do what they were supposed to do were missing. And immediately what came to mind was that in my book, I was talking about full kit. Full kit means before you start your role in the project, you have to look at the project and make sure that you have everything you need in order to complete your part. So as soon as you get started, there will be no delays and nothing holding you back from completing everything. What he did was he got people's collaboration to figure out what was missing to each of the key teams. He made sure they got it as soon as possible, prioritize what to start first, and then they got going. And the amazing thing is, and you can see it on my LinkedIn account if you want, I had to repost his video. They ended up winning a reward for finishing on time, full kit. It sounds like very easy. It's a checklist.
It's common sense, right?
But we don't have the discipline to do it in an orderly manner. And before we start every single project, there should be a gate at the entry point of our operation, and the gate should be closed. There should be a manager there, one that has enough authority and responsibility to check that the next project in line has the full kit. And if it has a full kit, he opens the gate, he said, start working on it.
Absolutely.
But if there is no full kit, he should have the power to say, sorry, no. The answer is no. We have the discipline from now on. We are changing the culture to make sure that we are working with full kits. No more unnecessary delays.
No, it makes sense. Total sense.
There are other obstacles to flow like that are not less simple, but again, it's not about, we want simple solutions. Projects are complicated enough, but we have to recognize that this is what the cause for the delay, and we have to take care of it. You were going to say something?
The thing is with manufacturing, if our listeners are manufacturers, it applies. I mean, in manufacturing, it's all related to project environment. And many times in manufacturing, there is really the full kit is missing.
Absolutely.
And that's why it happens all the time in different manufacturing environments as well. One of the key concepts that I think many times is missing is the concept of the full kit.
No question about it. I heard from a manufacturer in India of custom-made jeans, pants and jackets. One of the largest companies for custom-made jeans in India. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but you can imagine India. These are large numbers, okay, of products and portfolio and SKUs, large in Indian scales. And what he said was they went through the 5 focusing steps of the goal and they identified the constraint. And there was no doubt that the constraint was their master's department. They had very few people who had the master skill to actually sew the jeans, sew the denim. They didn't have an issue with inventory. They didn't have an issue with the cutters. They didn't have an issue with the final touches. But the actual sewing was the constraint. And when they went to exploit the constraints, step number 2 of the 5 focusing steps in production, what they noticed was the tremendous amount of time that these masters were wasting running around looking for the right zipper at the right size, at the right color to match.
Happens all the time.
And when they started building the full kit, we were expecting the full kit to have physical elements like zippers and buttons and the thread and the cloth and all that. But there were other things in the full kit that were almost more important. For example, final measurements. Sometimes one person would say, I'm expecting to losing some weight. I know I'm in line for my custom denim in 6 months. Call me, I will give you my final waist size. Someone forgot to call him. Guess what the master is doing now instead of sewing? He's running around looking for the customer a phone number, which he didn't find, of course. And then when he found that person doesn't answer, started looking around and, can you send me your measurements? No, I'm sorry, I'm at work. I will send it to you tomorrow. What a waste of time. And what they found out was that after they wrote the full kit, their number one cause for delays in their bottlenecks was the signature autograph that was embroidered on the jeans. Very often when they took the person's measurements, they asked him, okay, so what autograph do you want? Do you want it on your pocket? Do you want it on the, what color do you want it? Do you want your initials or a flower? There are countless options. And he would say, give me time to think about it. And no one came back to follow up on that. But now the master needs to do it. As soon as they started doing it, the percentage of hours that the masters people were actually able to sew was just unbelievable. Their productivity went up by dozens of percents just by instituting the full kit in that point.
Exactly. And you also mentioned another point is where the gate, right? Don't release work that is not complete, but also sometimes manufacturers, what they do is they release too much work. And what it creates a lot of work in process, right? Work in process inventory. So that's another kind of control mechanism of once you know what's the constraint, what's the capacity of the constraint. So first of all, obviously it has to be full kitted, but additionally, you don't want to release too much work that is just going to create chaos on the production line. Right?
Absolutely. Controlling WIP is another rule of flow. We tend to tell ourselves we don't really know how much production we can do through our operation. We don't really know how many projects. Come on, we know. And if we have too many, we know that we suffer the consequences. We have to multitask like crazy between one another. We cause delays. People get burned out. We know we suffer from it. One of the most important rules of flow is control WIP. Control the amount of work in process that you have in the operation so that things can go fast.
Exactly.
And for sure, the most accurate way to do about it is once you identify the constraint, the resource with the most limited capacity in the entire operation, you know that there is no reason whatsoever to overload the system with too much work that will just stand in line waiting for the constraint. So that's the best mechanism to determine the right WIP.
Exactly.
In projects, as I said, very often we can significantly improve our project performance without even reaching the point of identifying the constraint way before that. And at that point, we don't even have to recognize and identify the constraint in order to control the WIP. We just know that we are handling too many projects. We freeze some of them to get the flow going. And we get used to the mechanism that only when we stop complete one project, we release a new one. We open the gate to start working on the next project that is standing in line that has full kit.
Yeah, makes sense. No, absolutely. Yeah, and it sounds like you said, same in production, you can definitely, in the beginning, you're probably going to freeze some open work orders. I guess when we don't follow the rules of flow, there is an urge to invest. And the investment, what I noticed, many manufacturers do upstream in one of the very first processes upstream to get a bigger machine, bigger whatever. And I think the logic is if we produce more, we're gonna definitely release more. But unfortunately, what happens, actually, you're just building more work in process because it's so critical for us not to jump steps, but to actually understand what is the capacity of the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. Key if we want to avoid the mountains of inventory standing there in the plant and blocking everyone's passage. There is a way to systematically manage production. We know it works. It works in countless of plants around the world. It's not a matter of culture. It's a matter of let's do it right. And we know that it's working. What I said was, I completely agree with you that controlling the WIP, having the right amount of inventory and amount of work in process is key in order to avoid delays, in order to avoid mistakes, in order to produce on time, and in order to have reliable due dates. And it is doable. It is more than doable. We proved it in countless of manufacturers around the world. It's not a matter of it works only in other countries. No, it works everywhere.
Exactly. Many times we hear it a lot, actually, that, oh, you don't understand, we are different, right? We are so different. But what's interesting is a lot of those UDIs, right, undesirable effects, are very similar in different environments. What's different is the culture. The culture is different.
I was recently invited to be a keynote in the IPMA organization, a yearly congress at Ede in the Netherlands. And they were like, we made sure that we gave you one of our leading experts in the theory of constraints. You have to consult him about the different cultures so you know how to tailor your presentation to the Dutch audience, because we are different and we are unique and we need to make sure that what you're talking about is relevant to us. And since I heard it so many times, the only thing that I could do is smile and guarantee to them, we suffer from the same undesirable effects everywhere. And
Absolutely.
don't worry.
Yes.
We speak the same language.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you probably start speaking, they're like, oh, how do you know? How do you know about our operation? So that's the first thing they will think. It's like she's speaking to us.
Absolutely. You know, very often I start by describing the vicious cycle that we suffer from. We tend to have delays, and because we tend to have delays and we know that if we don't start early, there's no chance we will finish on time. So we try to start as early as possible, which means we push more projects into the WIP, which means we end up multitasking between more projects. The ones that we are supposed to finish, the one that we're in the middle, and we start with the one we just started. More multitasking means more delays. So we have to start earlier and we go into that loop until we're choked. And I'm talking with students and they're saying, Efrat, we really appreciate they're trying to make the presentation dramatic for us, but that cannot be the reality in organizations. You have to be exaggerating. It's not that bad. Please tell us it's not that bad. I'm talking about, bachelor degree students with no experience. Is it? Am I exaggerating?
No. Every day is firefighting. And then you
it
have those
doesn't have to.
heroes.
It doesn't have to.
But then you have the hero, the heroes organization that everybody's applauding after they fought some serious fire and they were able to win. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, but it didn't have to be like that.
Right. And this is why I think it was so important to me to finally take that year and write my father's book for him, because it just didn't make sense to me that with this brilliant knowledge, only his inner circle was aware of it and no one else knew it existed. No one else knew he developed it. It didn't make sense to keep it that way.
Yeah.
This type of solutions have to be in the public domain, and they have to be released in a way that for most managers, it will be easy enough for them to pick up the book, read it, and go implement it. In more complicated situations, yes, you will need a local expert, a TOC consultant to help you out get started, but then you develop enough intuition and you're good to go on your own. The challenge was, how do I take less than 200 pages and deliver enough intuition so consultants and managers can pick it up and take it from there? And of course, me being a TOC practitioner, the publisher recommended 200 pages. Of course, I said 170 because I needed 30 pages buffer. I have 171 pages in the original in English. I used 1 page from the buffer.
That's amazing. That's funny. But yeah, you mentioned that you can actually implement it yourself. But I think why it's nice sometimes to get some outside help, like a third-party organization, like a consulting firm or whatever, to help you implement is to get this outside view looking in. That really helps kind of lead the way to hold you by the hand and implement, and you can get to sustainability faster rather than doing it all yourself when you got to stop fighting fires first. And
I
if
couldn't
you're in a
agree
vicious cycle, you would never be able to stop.
I couldn't agree more. But then if you read the book, you're talking about the same language and you know which consultant to look for.
Exactly. Wow. So what's next for Efrat then? Are
Well,
you keynotes speaking in different countries, different regions, or another book? Yeah, I'll let you answer that.
I think the current challenge is to, once I wrote the book, to make sure that it is available to as many people as possible. And because of it, we are now in the process of translating the book to other languages. We already have 12 translations within 2 years, and 4 or 5 more are in the making. And
Wow.
hopefully they will be completed by the end of this year. And the other challenge is just to create awareness. With that flood of books that are now published, it's very hard to create awareness, even if I have something that has so much value.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
How do you break the noise through the noise, right?
yes, precisely. So I was tremendously lucky to already have relationship with these amazing publishers who have been publishing the goal for many years. But it's also up to me to participate in podcasts like yours. And thank you
Yep.
again for inviting me, and in
Absolutely.
other
It's a pleasure is
presentations.
ours.
And
That's great. Well, it'd be
so
nice
we
to.
covered a little bit about the full kit, but I think
Yep.
we can cover other obstacles to flow in other podcasts in the future if you wish.
Yes, yeah, I love that idea. We're definitely gonna do that again. And it was really great having you here.
Thank you. Until
Thank
the
you so
next
much.
time, I guess.
Yep. Until the next time.
Bye for now.
Bye bye.